good morning, good morning. It's a bright and sunshiny day. Hey, is everybody doing today? I'm on time today. Yep, it's 7:27. Oh, really 7, but 7's hard. But at 7:30. We're doing stories today. The first one is David and Goliath. Second one is Why David Must Run Away. Good girl. Yes, she's a good girl. She had the middle of the night and says, I'm coming. I'm coming. She kept at it. I'm coming. I'm coming. I had to get up. I had to make myself get up to take her out. I was like, my body wouldn't move. This like this. Man, I was having pains. I sat up. Because this happens to everybody in the morning. It's because when you're laying down, you toss and turn, and you cause air in your digestive tract. And you fart. So that's that's what happens. And that's what needed to come out. And then the pain went away. So let's start. Our Father in heaven, may your name be kept holy. May your kingdom come soon. May your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And forgive our sins as we have forgiven those who sin against us. And don't let us yield to temptation, but rescue us from the evil one. Jehovah, thank you for another beautiful day on your beautiful earth. And thank you for allowing us to wake up today. And thank you for what you did for us in the past, present, and what you will do for us in the future. There we go. Sorry, I had a big itch. I hate me too. Well, please look after. Wait, she's on there. Just making sure. I had to put Christina to the right. Joe, please help Tate, who has a heart condition and cancer. And please continue help to the rest of our family and friends who has the family who has cancer. Cindy Lee, Lisa, Shannon Doherty, King Charles, Kate, Jen's friend Shannon, and Isabella Strahan. It's Michael Strahan's daughter, which is identical twin. Help them, give them physical and mental strength to fight off their disease, and please put your healing hands on them to heal, and as well as Cindy Lee. Oh, Cindy Lee's there, but Celine Dion. Please be taking the mental strength to fight it off, fight through that pain. Please help Jenny, Tiffany, and Christina with the Robin Taylor's and to transition into eternal rest quicker and painless. Just let her go off to sleep. It's the best way to go. Please help her daughters get a permanent place to stay. Let it be good. And continue to help Arnie, Vicky, and the family, Carol and her mom, and anything they need. Please help her in Jesus' name, amen.
Number 58, David and Goliath. The Philistines again come to fight against Israel. David's three oldest brothers are now in Saul's army. So one day, Jesse tells David, "Take some grain and loaves of bread to your brothers. Find out how they are getting along." When David arrives at the army camp, he runs to the battle line to look for his brothers. The Philistine giant Goliath comes out to make fun of the Israelites. He has been doing this every evening for 40 days. He yells, "Choose one of your men to fight me. If he wins and kills me, but if I win and kill him, you will be our slaves. I dare you to pick someone to fight me." David asked some of the soldiers, "What will the man get who kills this Philistine and Israel from this shame?" "Saul will give the man many riches." The soldier, about 3 meters tall, and this Philistine will. David goes and puts them into his giant. When Goliath sees him, he can't believe it. He thinks it will be so easy to kill David. "Just come to me," Goliath says, "and I will give your body to the birds and animals to eat. The sword, a name of Jehovah,
Hold on, baby.
and I will strike you down. At that, David runs toward Goliath. He takes a stone from his bag, puts it into his sling, and throws it with all his might. The stone flies straight into Goliath's head, and he falls down. When the Philistines see that their champion has fallen, they all turn and run. The Israelites run after them and win the battle. Story?
Okay, I have to take the puppy out. Come on, baby, let's go potty. Oh, here we go. Go pee pee. I am so sorry. Let me go back and see how much we missed. I have no idea how long it's been like that. See? This is why I have multiple things so I don't have to leave that. I have another iPad going. Dun, dun. Carol, I thought I said one passage. I said one passage, Carol. Turn this up. Are you kidding me? Oh no. We. Alright, I need someone's help that's watching to let me know when I'm buffering. The last thing that was heard was when I took her out to go potty. So that's why Carol did not hear me say one passage. So, you did not see nothing like this. So, what we have to do is. It's okay. So, we read this. It's the last thing you know, scene that we read. So now we need to go read that all over again. That's fine. See, I said so I'm gonna get done nice and early unless something happens. There you go.
And the Philistines assembled their armies for war. They assembled at Soko, which belongs to Judah, and they camped between Soko and Azekah in Ephes Dammim. Saul and the men of Israel assembled and camped in the valley of Elah, and they drew up in battle formation to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied the mountain on one side, and the Israelites occupied the mountain on the other side, with the valley between them. Then a champion came out from the camps of the Philistines. His name was Goliath, from Gath, and his height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a helmet of copper on his head, and he was wearing a coat of mail of overlapping scales. The weight of the copper coat of mail was 5,000 shekels. He had shin guards of copper on his legs, and a javelin of copper slung between his shoulders. The wooden shaft of his spear was like the beam of loom workers, and the iron blade of his spear weighed 600 shekels, and his shield-bearer was marching ahead of him. Then he stood and called out to the battle line of Israel and said to them,
"Why have you come out to draw up in battle formation? Am I not the Philistine? And are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and strike me down, we will then become your servants. But if I prevail against him and strike him down, you will become our servants and serve us."
The Philistine then said,
"I do taunt the battle line of Israel this day. Give me a man, and let us fight it out."
When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they became terrified and greatly afraid. Now David was the son of the Ephrathite from Bethlehem of Judah named Jesse, who had 8 sons, and who, in the days of Saul, was already an old man. The 3 oldest sons of Jesse had followed Saul to the war. The names of his 3 sons who went to war were Eliab, the firstborn, his second son Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest, and the 3 oldest followed Saul. David was going back and forth from Saul to tend the sheep of his father at Bethlehem. Meanwhile, the Philistine would come forward and take his position each morning and each evening for 40 days. Then Jesse said to his son David,
"Take, please, this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread, and carry them quickly to your brothers in the camp. And take these 10 portions of cheese to the chief of the 1,000. Also, you should check on the welfare of your brothers, and bring back some token from them."
They were with Saul and all the other men of Israel in the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines. So David got up early in the morning and left someone in charge of the sheep. Then he packed up and went, just as Jesse had commanded him. When he came to the camp enclosure, the army was going out to the battle line, shouting a battle cry. Israel and the Philistines drew up, so that one battle line faced the other battle line. David immediately left his baggage in the care of the baggage keeper and ran to the battle line. When he arrived, he began asking about the welfare of his brothers. While he was speaking with them, there came the champion named Goliath, the Philistine from Gath. He came out from the battle line of the Philistines, and he spoke the same words as before, and David heard him. When all the men of Israel saw the man, they fled from him, terrified. The men of Israel were saying,
"Have you seen this man who is coming out? He comes to taunt Israel."
The king will give great riches to the man who strikes him down. He will give him his own daughter, and he will give the house of his father exemption in Israel.
David began to say to the men who were standing near him,
"What will be done for the man who strikes down that Philistine over there and takes away reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should taunt the battle line of the living God?"
Then the people told him the same thing as before.
This is what will be done for the man who strikes him down.
When his oldest brother, Eliab, heard him speak to the men, he became angry with David and said,
"Why have you come down? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I well know your presumptuousness and the bad intentions of your heart. You came down just to see the battle."
To this, David said,
What have I done now? I was only asking a question.
So he turned from him toward someone else and asked the same thing as before, and the people gave him the same reply as before. The words that David had spoken were overheard and reported to Saul. So he sent for him. David said to Saul,
Let no one lose heart because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine.
but Saul said to David,
You are not able to go fight against this Philistine, for you are but a boy, and he has been a soldier from his youth.
David then said to Saul,
Your servant became a shepherd of his father's flock, and a lion came, also a bear, and each carried off a sheep from the flock. I went out after it and struck it down and rescued it from its mouth. When it rose up against me, I grabbed it by its fur and struck it down and put it to death. Your servant struck down both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will become like one of them, for he has taunted the battle lines of the living God.
Then David added,
Jehovah, who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear, he is the one who will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine.
At this, Saul said to David,
Go, and may Jehovah be with you.
Saul now clothed David with his garments. He put a copper helmet on his head, after which he clothed him with a coat of mail. Then David strapped on his sword over his garments and tried to go, but could not, for he was not used to them. David said to Saul,
I am unable to go in these things, for I am not used to them.
So David took them off. He then took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the stream bed and placed them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and his sling was in his hand. And he began approaching the Philistine. The Philistine came closer and closer to David, and his shield-bearer was ahead of him. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he sneered at him in contempt because he was just a ruddy and handsome boy. So the Philistine said to David,
Am I a dog, so that you are coming against me with sticks?
With that the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine said to David,
Just come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the heavens and to the beasts of the field.
David replied to the Philistine,
You are coming against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I am coming against you in the name of Jehovah of armies, the God of the battle line of Israel, whom you have taunted. This very day Jehovah will surrender you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And on this day I will give the corpses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the heavens and to the wild beasts of the earth. And people of all the earth will know that there is a God in Israel. And all those gathered here will know that it is not with the sword or the spear that Jehovah saves, for the battle belongs to Jehovah, and he will give all of you into our hand.
Then the Philistine rose and drew steadily closer to meet David. But David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. David thrust his hand into his bag and took a stone from there and slung it. He struck the Philistine in the forehead, and the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. He struck down the Philistine and put him to death, though there was no sword in David's hand. David continued running and stood over him. Then he took hold of the Philistine's sword and pulled it out of its sheath and made sure that he was dead by cutting off his head with it. When the Philistines saw that their mighty one had died, they fled. At that, the men of Israel and of Judah rose and broke into shouting and pursued the Philistines all the way from the valley to the gates of Ekron. And the slain of the Philistines lay fallen along the road from Shaaraim as far as Gath and Ekron. After the Israelites returned from hotly pursuing the Philistines, they pillaged their camps.
One more.
Then David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem. But he put the Philistines' weapons in his own tent. At the moment that Saul...
No. It says 54. So that's it. So now we go over to the... See, I've already read this one. That one. But I didn't know that I was not connected. So I apologize for that. But there's no one here. So they probably, instead of telling me in the chat, it's not their job to do it. Because Carol's not here. Because I'm not going to read the passages because she's not here. Because she left.
Story number 59.
Again.
Why David must run away. After David kills Goliath, Israel's army chief Abner brings him to Saul. Saul is very pleased with David. He makes him a chief in his army and takes him to live at the king's house. Later, when the army returns from fighting the Philistines, the women sing, "Saul has killed thousands, but David tens of thousands." This makes Saul jealous because David is given more honor than Saul is. But Saul's son Jonathan is not jealous. He loves David very much, and David loves Jonathan too. So the two make a promise to each other that they will always be friends. David is a very good player of the harp, and Saul likes the music that he plays. But one day, Saul's jealousy causes him to do a terrible thing.
Lay down.
While David is playing the harp, Saul takes his spear and throws it, saying, "I will pin David to the wall." But David dodges, and the spear misses. Later, Saul misses David again with his spear. So David knows now that he must be very careful. Do you remember the promise that Saul made? He said that he would give his daughter to be the wife of the man who killed Goliath. Saul at last tells David that he can have his daughter Michal, but first he must kill 100 of the enemy Philistines. Think of that! Saul really hopes that the Philistines will kill David, but they don't, and so Saul gives his daughter to be David's wife. One day, Saul tells Jonathan and all his servants that he wants to kill David. But Jonathan says to his father, "Don't hurt David. He has never done anything wrong to you. Rather, everything he has done has been a great help to you. He risked his life when he killed Goliath. And when you saw it, you were glad." Saul listens to his son, and he promises not to hurt David. David is brought back, and he serves Saul in his house again just as he did before. One day, however, while David is playing music, Saul again throws his spear at David. David dodges, and the spear hits the wall. This is the third time. David knows now that he must run away. That night, David goes to his own house, but Saul sends some men to kill him. Michal knows what her father plans to do, so she tells her husband, "If you don't get away tonight, tomorrow you will be dead." That night, Michal helps David to escape through a window. For about 7 years, David must hide in one place after another so that Saul cannot find him. Story number...
Okay. 1 Samuel. Chapter 18, verses 1 through 30. Yep. The whole thing.
Chapter 18. As soon as David had finished speaking to Saul, Jonathan and David became bound together in close friendship, and Jonathan began to love him as himself. From that day, Saul kept David with him, and he did not allow him to return to his father's house. And Jonathan and David made a covenant, because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the sleeveless coat that he wore and gave it to David, along with his gear, his sword, his bow, and his belt. David began going out, and was successful wherever Saul would send him. So Saul put him in charge of the fighting men, and this pleased all the people and the servants of Saul. When David and the others would return from striking down the Philistines, the women would come out from all the cities of Israel with song and dances to meet King Saul with tambourines, with rejoicing, and with lutes. The women who were celebrating would sing,
Saul has struck down his thousands,
and David his tens of thousands.
Saul became very angry, and this song displeased him, for he said,
They have credited David with tens of thousands, but to me they have credited thousands. The only thing left to give him is the kingship.
From that day on, Saul was always looking at David suspiciously. The next day, a bad spirit from God gripped Saul, and he started to act strangely inside the house while David was playing music on the harp, as on other occasions. Saul had a spear in his hand, and he hurled the spear, saying to himself,
I will pin David to the wall.
But David escaped from him twice. Then Saul was afraid of David, because Jehovah was with him, but had departed from Saul. So Saul removed him from his presence, and appointed him as chief of 1,000, and David would lead the army into battle. David continued to have success in all he did, and Jehovah was with him. And when Saul saw that he was very successful, he became afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, because he would lead them in their campaigns. Saul later said to David,
Here is my oldest daughter, Merab. I will give her to you as a wife. However, you should continue to display your courage for me and fight the wars of Jehovah.
For Saul said to himself,
Do not let my hand come against him. Let the hand of the Philistines strike him.
At this David said to Saul,
Who am I? And who are my relatives, my father's family in Israel, for me to become son-in-law to the king?
However, when the time came to give Saul's daughter Merab to David, she had already been given to be the wife of Adriel, the Maholathite. Now Saul's daughter Michal was in love with David, and it was reported to Saul, and this pleased him. So Saul said,
I will give her to him to serve as a snare to him, so that the hand of the Philistines may come upon him.
Saul then said to David a second time,
You will form a marriage alliance with me today.
Further, Saul ordered his servants,
Speak to David secretly and say, Look, the king is pleased with you, and all his servants are fond of you. So now form a marriage alliance with the king.
When Saul's servants told David these things, David said,
Is it a trivial matter to you to form a marriage alliance with the king, when I am a man poor and lightly esteemed?
Then Saul's servants reported to him.
These are the words that David spoke.
At that Saul said,
This is what you should say to David. The king does not want any bride price, except 100 foreskins of the Philistines, to take revenge on the enemies of the king.
For Saul was scheming to have David fall by the hand of the Philistines. So his servants reported these words to David, and it was pleasing to David to form a marriage alliance with the king. Before the allotted time, David went with his men and struck down 200 Philistine men, And David brought the full number of their foreskins to the king to form a marriage alliance with the king.
No.
Therefore Saul gave him his daughter Michal as a wife. Saul realized that Jehovah was with David, and that his daughter Michal loved him.
Sorry.
This made Saul even more afraid of David, and Saul became an enemy of David for the rest of his life. The princes of the Philistines would go out to battle, but as often as they went out, David was more successful than all the servants of Saul, and his name was highly esteemed.
And now it's going to go right to the next chapter.
Chapter 19.
1 through 18.
Saul later spoke to Jonathan his son and to all his servants about putting David to death. Since Saul's son Jonathan was very fond of David, Jonathan told David,
My father Saul wants to have you put to death. Please be on your guard in the morning and go to a secret place and remain hidden. I will go out and stand next to my father in the field where you will be. I will talk about you to my father, and if I learn anything, I will be sure to tell you.
So Jonathan spoke well of David to his father Saul. He said to him,
The king should not sin against his servant David, for he has not sinned against you, and what he has done for you has benefited you. He risked his life to strike down the Philistine, so that Jehovah brought about a great victory for all Israel. You saw it, and you were overjoyed. So why should you sin against innocent blood in having David put to death for no reason?
Saul listened to Jonathan, and Saul swore,
As surely as Jehovah is living, he will not be put to death.
Afterward Jonathan called David and told him all these things. So Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he continued to serve him as before. In time, war broke out again, and David went out and fought against the Philistines and struck them down with a great slaughter, and they fled from before him. And a bad spirit from Jehovah came upon Saul when he was sitting in his house with his spear in his hand, while David was playing music on the harp. Saul tried to pin David to the wall with the spear, but he eluded Saul, who drove the spear into the wall. David fled and escaped during that night. Saul later sent messengers to David's house to watch it and to kill him in the morning. But David's wife Michal told him,
If you do not escape tonight, tomorrow you will be a dead man.
Immediately Michal let David down through the window so that he could run away and escape. Michal took the teraphim statue and placed it on the bed, and she put a net of goat hair at the place of his head, and she covered it with a garment. Saul now sent messengers to take David, but she said,
He is sick.
So Saul sent the messengers to see David and told them,
Bring him to me on his bed to have him put to death.
When the messengers came in, there was the teraphim statue on the bed and a net of goat hair where his head would have been. Saul said to Michal,
Why did you trick me like this and send my enemy away so that he could escape?
Michal replied to Saul,
He said to me, Send me away, or I will kill you.
Now David had run away and escaped, and he came to Samuel at Ramah. He told him all that Saul had done to him.
This is it.
Then he and Samuel went away, and they stayed in Naioth.
And that will be it for today. Like I just said, is there any Carol, are you here? Because this is the last time I am asking, because if you're not here, I don't need to read your request. You have to go potty? Just go poo. Well, I have to go. Carol, if you can hear me, I will read them next time. I have to go. Love, don't judge. Peace out.